Welcome to another Fierce Street review.
Today, we're reviewing Sun, which begins streaming on Shudder July 8th. And just so you know, that's SON, not SUN. We ain't talking about a planet.
Oh, um, knowing us, there's gonna be a ton of spoilers. So hit pause and go away if you don't want those. If you're cool with spoilers, then keep listening because we're gonna give them to you.
If you're cruising for a bruising, we're here to give it to you.
Listen.
In Sun, after a mysterious group breaks into Laura's home and attempts to abduct her 8-year-old son, David, the two of them flee town in search of safety. Following her maternal instincts, Laura commits unspeakable acts to keep him alive. But soon she must decide how far she's willing to go to save her son.
This movie opened with religion and childbirth, which are two things that are just not in my ministry. They're not in my wheelhouse. um, so I was like, this is gonna be creepy. And then it also, I'm from Missouri, so when I saw that they were talking about a girl who escaped a Kansas cult, which is next door to Missouri, I was like, oh, there's a lot to mine there, and I wonder how we're gonna deal with it. So
Yeah,
I was cautiously curious when I got those details up top.
right. No, same. And I will say this before we get into our deep down feelings about this film. There were some decent jump scares. There were some scares that I was like, oh shit. Um, so I will
Yeah,
give it that. There was some
no,
creepiness and some
yeah.
general good jump scares.
They opened a woman like a lobster at Lobster Fest, and that's an image that will stay with me
Sheree will never
no
be able to
matter what
eat
I
lobster
think.
again.
Oh, we won't go that far. I'm just gonna say that image will stay with me as I do it. If somebody wants to buy me a lobster, I'm open for business.
For sure, for sure. I will say there were so many plot holes though, because you were speaking about the opening, and so I want to mention this. So in the opening, she's like freaking out because she's giving birth and she's running away from people, and then she gets in the car and she's like, "I don't want you, I don't want you, I don't want you." She has the baby. Well, then we jump forward, and suddenly she's surprised that this baby that she knew that Satan fathered is like eating people, and she doesn't know where it's coming from. And I'm just like, I don't understand.
I think what is happening here is one of my issues is that we are not dealing with trauma the way it should be dealt with. So we don't see her have years of being told this isn't what happened because she told herself her father was the father of her baby because again it was a Kansas cult. And so that's her narrative, and everybody else who was there and want to own up to it is like, no, that's Satan's baby. You give birth to Satan's baby, and this movie doesn't handle that well. It feels like a movie that was written before all of the conversations that people have trying to have within the last couple of decades. And so it's very much like, let's play with trauma. Let's make her seem like she's not in her right mind. Let's make her an unreliable narrator about trauma that's happened to her. Trigger warning, content warning, sexual assault is very much in play here, and it's not being handled with care.
Yeah, sexual assault to children as well.
Also, very much not handled with care.
No.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, but it never answered that question until the very end, which I thought was a cop out, 100%. When we finally realized the ending. I thought the
Yeah.
ending killed it for me. I was just like, okay, I'm done. I'm
I,
done.
was upset. I don't even know. I was upset for most of the movie because we have like this really good, I would say, 15 minutes where I'm like, oh, this is another movie about motherhood and horror. That's a new thing that's popping up more often because there was like a long stretch where it was like in the fringes. But like lately, we've had sort of a renaissance of childbirth and motherhood and horror. And I was like, okay, it's going to be one of those. Again, not my path, but good to see people are being represented wherever I go. And then it was about assault and making survivors' narratives look murky. And I was not okay with that. And that came so early in the movie that it made me not trust this movie. And I'm glad because it braced me. So
Yeah.
I was like, I knew you were going to foul this ball if that's how you do that in a sports thing.
Yeah, and one of my critiques that I use all the time, I feel like if I'm going to say like a deep critique of a film, is the pacing of this movie was so slow. There was so many scenes of just driving for no goddamn reason. There were scenes of that weren't needed, and some deaths that weren't needed. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
It just felt like I wanted to get this movie over with.
I think the pacing would have been helped if we could have heard them. I kept losing the dialogue to background noise. There was lots of whispering in like diners and in hospitals. Even when she's trying to like lure people back to the hotel for to murder, let's leave it there. I'm trying to not ruin everything. When she's luring people back to the hotel to motel, it's a motel to murder. There's lots of I want to see you first, and I'm like, can you speak up? It's sexy when you use your indoor voice. Um, yeah.
I was like, I hope there's nothing important being said because I can't hear anything.
Listen, I also did not watch this with my glasses, so I kept being distracted trying to figure out who Emil Hirsch was because he looked familiar. When the credits rolled, I was like, "That's look familiar," because I know who he is. So my eyesight is that bad.
Yeah. I will say again, this isn't even my notes, but it just popped into my head. I don't like that we have the one black cop who, spoiler alert, does not make it.
He's black and he's cop. I have thoughts. Finish your thought because I have rants on rants on rants. Go for it.
I'm just gonna. Well, we've already said spoilers, so I'm just gonna because I've got to talk about this guy's death because it just doesn't make any goddamn sense. They all run into this room, slam the door, so there's no lights. They don't say we're the police. They don't say her name. They don't say we're here to help. They don't say drop the weapon. They don't say anything. They just run in and slam the door as she starts shooting.
I think again, that's the filmmakers and the story trying to make her look like she's unstable, as opposed to trying to like just tell a story that is not about how can we make her look so people don't trust her? How can we make it like some of this could be her fault? She could be lying. She could be the problem. That is not.
I was like,
we can no longer hinge movies on people not understanding mental health. We just can't. We can't.
But in that moment, the way they shot it, I was like, it's their fault for running in there and not saying who they were, what they're doing, who it is. They just run in there and slam the door shut so there's no light and she can't see anything. If I'm thinking if a cult's after me too, I'm probably going to shoot you as well. So like, it just makes no sense.
To be fair, we don't know those cops were not in the cult because things are also murky on so many other angles. But to our one black person in this movie, let's talk about this, good sir. First off, his dialogue where he asked Emil Hirsch's detective cop person if he's I think he said fucking. Did he say fucking? Did he say screwing?
Yeah.
Something like that. Are you fucking her? Because again, that's the reason he might want to have a pause and not just run up in this woman's room with guns and things ablaze. He also had like 3 scenes, and this is a trope I keep calling out. Specifically going back, I think the most recent time to the new Conjuring, where we cast black people in these like bit roles as cops. So people can be like, look, we're being diverse. Look at us. And it's not diverse. You're being like, here's the smallest role possible. And it's a man in uniform. So you're a noble character. And stop that shit. I still see you. I'm still counting screen time. I'm still counting lines. I'm still counting everything. You can't be like, this is a role we don't care about. Let's give it to a black person so we can pat ourselves on the back at the end of the day.
Yeah. 100% agree. I will say just one quick little more positive thing. Well, it's not really positive. Anyway, the trope of intruders in your house is one of the most terrifying tropes to me out there. I don't know what it is, but that scene where she first sees them in her son's bedroom, I almost flipped out. I mean, because it's like the first 10 minutes of this film.
Yeah.
It was terrifying. It reminded me of that scene from Annabelle where, of course, they didn't lock doors back then, but the mom's like walking around and suddenly this woman saying, I like your dolls. Nope. Hell no. Get the fuck up out of the house.
I don't like people in the house. I don't. That's why I don't hold parties, even before COVID. I also just want to throw out another issue I had, and that we already are abusing a lot of kids and women and playing with like mental health in a bad light. So we didn't need to go to this motel and see sex workers being abused too. I know why they did it, because they were like, we need to like find a way for her to like bring some more people in to get murdered because we haven't murdered enough people. But there are other ways to do that without also bringing in sex workers to abuse in this abuse fest. Well, I felt.
and you could have just cut that scene and had her be like, "Oh, this guy's an asshole. Let me go do that anyway." Like you didn't need to see it.
Everything he said made him an asshole. Like even when she's seducing him, like take her top off, and I'm like, you don't talk to somebody you're trying to screw that way. Like I mean, unless y'all are into that, which she don't seem to be reciprocating that. So there were choices being made, and I'm not sure they were the right choices.
Yeah.
I know they're not the right choices. I'm going to own that. I know they're not the right choices. I'm going to resolve that right here, right now. Yeah.
The gore was hit or miss for me, just on effectiveness. Sometimes I thought it was like when you were mentioning the woman that's like filleted open. That was like, what the fuck? Ooh. But then like when she's picking up his arm, it's like it's not even heavy to her, and I'm like, what? She's down Superwoman. But then at the end, what the hell was that devil cost? I was just like,
yeah.
You look like a deer.
I really wanted this movie to work out before they announced they would not be working out. Because I feel about movies where we like use real world responsibilities to make a plot. Like we have to take care of somebody, and this person may or may not be something else, and they may or may not need to do something sort of awful to survive. What does that look like? Well, especially when people treat their family members and they're like loved ones, or when you bring someone back from the dead. So I really wish we could have isolated that idea and not put it here, but put it somewhere else where it would have been handled with care and a plot that would have served it with a story that would have served it. If that makes sense. I am all about the hands right now. Jazz hands. Oh damn it!
Oh, yeah, and my final question: the house, this cult house, why was it just abandoned in the middle of a birthday party? I don't like. Again, what?
Kansas.
Well, that's true. Shit happens in Kansas.
Look, as much as I have issues with the Kansas, Missouri area, because again, I'm from Missouri, the way this movie treated the other survivor and addiction, also, they were just like running down a list of things that we've had conversations of and should be moving forward from. And they're like, no, we want to keep it the way it was in the 80s because this will be spooky. And I'm like, no, don't do that. And they're like, well, we're gonna.
Right. Well, okay. Yay or nay, Sheree?
Nay, I say. I think this is another movie that would have benefited from being written and directed by someone who could explore these things with more nuance and care.
Agreed. While there were parts that I thought worked, and there were some decent jump scares, and it was decently creepy, it's still a nay for me as well, just because I think that we could have had all of those things that I think were working for the film in a better movie, and written and / directed by someone who knew how to handle these difficult topics with a little more care and nuance, like you said, and intention. I always say intention.
Yeah, especially because again, we are in this motherhood and horror boom. We need more femmes handling those narratives because as someone who's not having children, but possibly could, because I have like the things, I'm hoping are rusting. I wouldn't feel comfortable telling a motherhood story, as I don't know why certain people feel comfortable telling these stories, and then like failing so bluntly. How about if we want a story about motherhood, we find some moms who work in horror and employ them and support them. Let's do that.
They're out there.
They are. I will never be one, but they're out there. and that's what I would do if they were like, we want this story about motherhood. I'd be like, I'm not one, but here's a short list of people I've met on Twitter. I wouldn't be like, I got this.
Out the way.
Right. Me and my lack of maternal instincts are gonna write you a motherhood story.
I mean, to be fair, yours would probably be better than what we got in this one. So
listen, and not saying a whole lot by saying a whole no. Anywho, special thanks to our friends at Shudder for this screener.
Yes, even though we hated it. I'm just kidding. Hit us up in the comments if you agree or disagree, or if you have other thoughts that you want to bring to the table. They're always welcome, and we'd love to hear from you guys. So, and as always, make sure you stay fierce out there.
Bye.